Rachel is much, much more than a landlady. She's a fantastic activist, a real fighter, a fantastic anti-racist, you know, somebody who fights, talks truth to power. We must, and she'll come back at the end as well. Now, she tells the story correctly. About 2 years ago, Shirin Hirsch, who we should congratulate having produced Maya, who's sitting there all of 2 months old, came into this pub and we got the most fantastic welcome from Shirin, from Rachel. Shirin and I told her the story, which is actually on the board there. We put a couple of photographs up there. The first photograph is of Len Johnson, and the second is of a man called Wilf Charles. Now, both of them were active members of the Communist Party. This is October 1953, the middle of the Cold War, and they've been anti-racist activists in this city for quite some time. They actually founded just off Denmark Street, the New International Club, which was an amazing club which actually did things like invited Paul Robeson to come and sing in the city, and he sang to thousands of people in 1949. And the point about this club was it was a club which was designed to fight racism. It was designed to actually organise from below, people on the ground. At that time, mainly black seafarers. The West Indian community was just beginning to take off, but it was mainly still seafarers. A number of people who'd been West Indian servicemen should be included, though. And they basically had been active for a few years, and for reasons which we should go into later, the club had closed in 1950, but Len and Wilf had kept the faith and came into this pub in October 1953. And Len, who was 6 foot tall, asked to be served a pint. Len was a lifelong teetotaler, it should be remembered. You know, this was a clearly political decision, and they'd done it in a way which is, in my opinion, very carefully organised, because they immediately, having been refused, as I think they expected to be refused, wrote an article for the Daily Worker, the Communist Party newspaper of the time, which is I've copied up on the board there. Len was the secretary of the Mossai Communist Party, a very big organisation at the time, hundreds of members, and he was a scaffolder by trade. And he and Len had organised this campaign which followed the refusal to serve Len by going up to the town hall and getting the big names, the mayor and the secretary of the Trades Council, Horace Newbold, and various other names to sign up in support of the campaign. But more importantly, in my opinion, or equally importantly, they actually went around this area and got hundreds, I don't know hundreds, they got a large number of people to come down with them when 2 days later they returned to the pub, and surprise, surprise, at that point the landlord decided to serve them and the colour bar was broken. It was a great moment, and it's just a fantastic, yes, we should give Len a chat. Len will be back, yeah. And the point was that the colour bar had to be broken that way. It was battle by battle by battle. It didn't just all happen all overnight. People organised, determined not to allow racism to dictate who amongst themselves or their friends should or shouldn't be able to drink or to dance or to spend the night somewhere. These were things that had to be fought. And you know, we stand on the shoulders of those people who've gone before them. And in this year of Black Lives Matter, we need to reach back to our history. I'll just say two more things. One is that Len was part of the Congress that took place in this city exactly 75 years ago, the fifth Pan-African Congress, which had attending Kwame Nkrumah, who becomes the leader of the Ghanaian independence movement, Jomo Kenyatta, who becomes leader of the Kenya independence movement, Hastings Banda, who's the first president of what's now Malawi, and they at this conference declared that they were going to lead the liberation of Africa, and within 15 years they'd actually achieved that. The most astonishing. But the amount of publicity of this conference was tiny, but they had 100 delegates, and Len, who wasn't a delegate, he was an observer. The Communist Party had a rather strange relationship to the Congress. Nevertheless, they were all there, and they set off from this city, and it's a fantastic tribute, actually, to this city, or particularly the people who were organised, the black community of this city, that they were able to actually host this community, this conference. There was the Manchester Negro Association, led by a man called Peter Milliard, who was a GP Lower Broughton, in Salford, and others who actually organised to make sure that this Congress could take place in this city at a time when the colour bar was the norm. You know, if you were black, don't think about going dancing or anything like that. That was just the answer would just be no. So that's an important side to Len, and I do feel that we need to celebrate today the breaking of the colour bar, but we also need to remember the 75th anniversary of the Pan-African Congress. And this year of Black Lives Matter, I think that these are things which give us the confidence that if they could fight in the hostile environment of 1945 and 1953, then we can fight in the hostile environment of 2020. You know, it should give us the confidence to go forwards. So, okay, I'm going to finish there. I'm just going to ask anybody else. I know there are various people who are in the room who've got bits to contribute. If everybody would just simply like to contribute, we will go round the room. I think I've got a reasonably long lead, but if anybody feels minded to actually come up and stand here, it would make it a lot easier for me. Is anybody going to break the ice? Deej, please. You might as well come up here, Deej. I'll bring you back.
Yeah, what you got?
Yes, and this. Accepted.
Hi, can everyone hear me? Back in 2016, I was filled with the energy of being one of the leaders of the Black Lives Matter movement in Manchester. We'd held a historic rally and marched with upwards of 5,000 people from Alexandra Park in Moss Side to Manchester Town Hall. We demanded justice and equality and for black lives here, in America, and throughout the world. I was moved and taken by this movement. It felt as if for the first time, the city centre, which for too long and too often had been a place of intimidation and police stalking of young black men, was finally ours, as we chanted no justice, no peace, Black Lives Matter and Black Power. We felt like we were riding the wave of our forebears and laying a path for our children. Not long after, I was speaking to my friend Marcus, and we were talking about the movement and its historical context. My parents had fought the National Front in the 70s and 80s, but knowing Manchester's black history being both long and largely forgotten, I asked Marcus if he knew of anything which had been here before. It was that day where I first heard the name Len Johnson. My mind was blown by the idea of a 10,000 strong black-led rally for racial justice happening in Manchester in the 1940s. A man who was born down the road from my daughter's school, who had done so much for the community, had made such an impact, whose name that should be so familiar, most of us had never heard of. In the intervening years, myself, my friends, campaigners here and across the world, through the NUS Black Students Campaign, the National Education Union and the UCU, amongst many, many others, had fought to decolonise our institutions, to promote the truth that black, disabled, LGBTQ plus people, women and the working class have always been dynamic agents of progress. Friends, we have not yet won. But as any boxer will tell you, you don't train expecting a knockout in the first few rounds. And sometimes it is necessary to have a rematch after rematch after rematch. But even now, when faced with a regressive government and a Twitterati which decries even the most mild expression of racial equality, our ideas have taken hold. A discussion is now less Do we need Black History Month? And more, shouldn't this be covered in all of our curriculum? In all of our history? Earlier this year, we witnessed the brutal 8 minutes and 46 seconds where our brother, a father, a partner and a friend had his life force extinguished by an unrepentant actor for the state. They killed George Floyd. They killed Breonna Taylor. They killed Ahmaud Arbery. They killed Belly Mujinga. But friends, they resurrected a movement. They resuscitated the movement. They triggered marches and rallies throughout the world. Discussions which were held in places where they'd never had before. And we looked upon our cities. We saw slavers in stone, imperialists immortalised and whitewashers worshipped. And friends, we were disgusted. Rebels in Bristol, in Virginia, in Cape Town and Belgium tore down some of these monuments. As many of our ancestors were consigned to the bottom of the Atlantic, Colston's statue met a very similar watery end, and the Lord saw it and he saw that it was good. But as we challenge the mythologizing of a false history, we are left bereft of the symbols of our own. Where are our black heroes? Where are our working class fighters? Where are our women warriors? Where is our history? It was with this thought that we created the Len Johnson Memorial Campaign, to immortalise a man who should never have been forgotten again. And to maybe be a part of a balance to say that Vimto can be venerated whilst Mancunian people be right. We have now had over 1,000 signatures. The leader of Manchester City Council has expressed support. Greater Manchester's mayor has expressed support. The BBC had a story on their front page of their website about our Len. There is momentum here. And despite what the naysayers may say, this is not a moment. This is a movement. And we will not stop until every Mancunian who knows the name Martin Luther King can tell you all about our Len Johnson. And with solidarity, thank you.
A difficult one to follow. Would anybody like to, before I start naming people?
I'll take you. Yeah, I'm literally going to freestyle, and I'm not going to repeat after what Dee just said. It's I've grown up in boxing gyms since I was 8 years old. I'm from South Manchester. I'm mixed race. My dad's West African. Len would have looked like me. So when I came across Len's story, I was so moved by it that I was angry that I'd never heard of him before. But I'm so grateful that I know who he is now. And this campaign is going to continue to grow, and he's going to get the recognition he needs. I think, like I said, Muhammad Ali, he's been an idol of mine for as long as I can remember. That was until I heard of Len Johnson. Peace.
We could possibly do with some more about Len's boxing career.
I'll tell you a little bit. He fought a guy called Ted Kid Lewis, who Mike Tyson once described as one of the greatest fighters ever. Ted Lewis was a white man, British man from London. He had over 200 fights, won about 190. And you know, Len beat him. He beat European champions, he beat British champions, he beat some of the best fighters of his generation, and he wasn't recognised in the sport of boxing because Winston Churchill put in the colour bar in 1911. But by the time he retired in 1933, it was done. You know, he'd lost his ambition of the sport. You know, he had 135 fights, 93 wins. You know, he went to Australia and fought over there, and he got a Commonwealth sort of title, I think, and it wasn't classed as the British title, and it was about white supremacy in terms of not wanting a black man to beat a white man. You know, that will topple the empire. That will be something. You know, how could that ever happen? You know, how can we have a black man beat a white man? And you look at now Frank Bruno, Anthony Joshua, Lennox Lewis, so many black British boxers who are icons of the sport. You look at Anthony Joshua, he's had about 30 fights, but he's got a legacy that will live on for hundreds of years. But Len Johnson's, you can't even tie Len Johnson's shoelaces. So, you know, and he was born right here in Manchester, in South Manchester, well, in Clayton, and obviously he worked around here, but his boxing career was phenomenal. So, I think the fact that he wasn't allowed a British title, you know, says a lot, but it was his work outside of the ring as well, which obviously inspiring. But his legacy's living on, that's why we're all here today, and it's inspiring.
Yep. Can we play Miles Davis, Jack Johnson?
I'm sure we can, but Fred, would you mind if I put you on the spot to say something about what you did with the play that you helped put on?
I was one of the founders in Manchester in 1979 of something called WFA, or the Workers' Film Association. Some people may know a place that used to exist on Lucy Street, an old warehouse, and we used that as a venue for many events, and names of members of Manchester's black community. Kath Block, for example, did a lot of work with us there. Hartley Hanley, who used to do the Hideaway Youth Center. Gus John were frequently collaborators with people at WFA. And in 1987, there was a very interesting theater group in Manchester called Frontline Education. And Frontline, their method of working was they would go into a community group or a youth group, and they would talk about history or issues that were important to people in the youth group. And one of the issues that came up was the life of Len Johnson. And as various contributors have said, a lot of people didn't know about the life of Len Johnson. So they did a play which is called Struggle for Freedom. This is a remaining poster from 33 years ago, or a little flyer at the time. And we filmed it. And as far as I know, there should be a digitized copy of Struggle for Freedom in the Northwest Film Archive, which is based at the Central Reference Library in town, and you should be able to go in there. They took all of the WFA's material and got a grant from the BFI, and that's all been digitized. So you should, I believe, be able to go in there into what they call the little pods and search Len Johnson or Struggle for Freedom, and you should be able to watch that. And I think it's interesting. I don't know, you probably know the story of what are called the boxing booths, and Len Johnson used to have a boxing booth, and my son Frankie, who's one of the I don't know, he's one of the directors here or whatever, serving you drinks. His granddad, Sandy, used to go down and box in the boxing booths, and basically had the boxing, and Len Johnson had a boxing booth, so I don't know if Sandy, it wasn't his booth, but the way the boxing booths basically would work, there'd be a semi-professional boxer, he'd be set up and this was in Ardwick, and in Bellevue. And what would happen is that if you wanted to go around with a semi-professional boxer, if you got through the first round, you might get 10 bob or 50p or something for surviving the first round. If you got the second round, you might get a pound or whatever it happened to be. So Sandy would tell the story that he'd go down there and he would regularly box to try to make bit of coppers or whatever. And the interesting thing is that he would go down, he would box, and he'd come back home, and his mum would ask him, where has he been? because he looked like he'd been a little bit roughed up, or he was a bit of swelling in the cheeks. So he had to say, well, I was in the boxing booth. And he would tell the story that his mum gave him a worse hiding for having been boxing in the boxing booth than the guys in the booth there. So it's an interesting story. So the other thing I thought was quite interesting from a boxing standpoint is Sandy would say at the time is that you scored points not for just striking your opponent. You scored points for defense. So if you were a good defender, you could score points, which I think is quite interesting because now it's all down to aggression, whatever. But in terms of your campaign, I'm going to just leave this poster here for the pub. But aside from the article that the Old Abbey has on their website that the BBC has had on their site this week, the Working Class Movement Library, which is based at Jubilee House in Salford, has now the archive of all the frontline stuff, and they have an archive on the life of Len Johnson. So there's a lot of materials there that if people want to research, the Jubilee House is across the street from the art gallery in Salford. So, go down there, check it out, see what they've got. They've got a lot of interesting materials about Manchester history, and if we can find the play from Frontline, you could get that at the Central Reference Library. So here's to Len. Now I'm going to be bold and ask a young woman seated at the back.
I'm not young.
Would you come up and join me? Because you have a story to tell, don't you?
It's daft. Do I press anything?
Just go with it.
Well, my dad is 94, and for the past 10-15 years, he's been doing a lot of reminiscing. Can you hear me? I need to get loud.
A little bit closer because we're recording.
Oh God, you might regret me saying that. And he's been talking about Len Johnson. He sparred with Len Johnson back in the day, and all I ever got from him was he was tough. Now, my dad fell in love with Len Johnson's daughter. But, and he's never forgotten that was the love of his life. But he married my mother, and he never got over that. I have tried. At first, when I heard about Len Johnson, I started Googling him and that, and then I realised just what kind of a man he was, and I tried to draw it out for my dad. His political side, but my dad would only say, oh, he was tough, and then start going on about Len Johnson's daughter, Carol. I have tried to trace the family, because I know that Carol had a daughter, Maxine. I've never managed to do that. I would have brought him today, but it's outside, and at 94, he wouldn't have shut up anyway, so. But that's it, yeah. So Len Johnson has sort of been with us in our family for the last 15 years. As I say before, that I didn't know he existed. But I've done a lot of research, and he was a remarkable man. I'm just proud that my dad had the opportunity. Actually, my dad never made it as a boxer, but he's now in sheltered housing, and in his 80s, someone was trying to get him, and he punched him.
It's another one of those follow that moments, isn't it? Okay, well, if that's it, Rachel has a poem which she wants to finish with. So I'll go and find her if that's okay, and we'll ask her. Or did somebody? Here she is. Okay, she is. Come on. Yeah, come on.
I think there might be someone else who wants to. Yeah.
Okay, maybe you're right. I'm happy to be corrected.
Go on, you read it. Go on. You read your poem the other day. You go on.
Huh? No, I'm fine.
Go on.
Go on.
I didn't bring it.
Go on. You must have it on your phone. Come on.
Go on. Who's got the poem?
There you are. We can wait a minute.
Can you hear me? Oh, yeah. When those officers thought it right to take away another black man's life, they didn't even care to think if he had a family, children or a wife. You say you don't see colour, yet you play with my sister's hair. You'll say I didn't expect it to feel like that, as you mock at her and continue to stare. I asked to play, you spat at me, because of my colour I won't hide. But when they call me a liar, I learned in my teachers I can't confide. If my father drives a car that's much flashier than yours, you don't think he worked hard for it, you assume it's from an illegal cause. If I say I don't like it here, you tell me to go back where I'm from. I was born in Cheshire and all my cousins are from West Brom. You say that all lives matter, and yes indeed that's true. So why are you so angry when we say our lives matter too? This isn't about making every white person pay for their horrific atrocities of yesterday. We're sharing the injustices and how the plight has been misunderstood. No matter what the media states, we're not out for your blood. You call me a lefty or a snowflake if I don't like what you say. Did you ever think how degrading it is to hear the rubbish every day? When I want to shout or scream, you call me a racist fool. It's not my fault I was hated at school and the history of something. Did you learn about the Windrush generation brought to the UK to help rebuild our nation? Within moments of the ships reaching the destination, they were repaid with racist hatred and downright degradation. Did they teach you about Surtees Karma or his white British wife Ruth? And how they exiled him from what is now Botswana to stop him from uncovering the truth. To those of you who don't understand why the Colston statue met the fishes, please take some time to educate yourself, and from me, your best wishes.
Last chance. Okay, Rachel, I think it's your moment.
So what I want to say is, this space is for all of you. It's for the community. Everyone who works here is an activist. They care. if you've got any ideas or you want to launch anything, this is the perfect place for it. We can fundraise, we can help you get organised. And where it really came into play was about 2 years ago, one of my close friends was going to be deported because of Windrush. And what was amazing about the community here was because of the organic network of events that happened, it was so easy for everyone to come together. And within 5 days, we had a petition. We had 500 people meet at the Naya Mosque. So you may think just coming here for a drink doesn't really mean anything. But when it does matter, you have all these connections to the people around you, and they will be there for you when you need them. And this poem is by a woman called Tina Cribb, and her family grew up around the pub. And on Monday, when we didn't know what our fate was, I think this poem gave us all hope about what the pub is here for. There is hope in the old Abbey Taphouse. It comes in all shapes, sizes, characters, and guitar cases, and groups of smiling faces that they shelter from the world that's turned to chaos, is inside out. It's forgotten what humanity is about. But here you can sing, make music, read a poetry, and escape. It gives you enough space to clear your mind, with staff who do more than support. They know about injustice and the importance of being kind. I've never known a pub quite like the old Abbey, who opens its big heart to strangers, gives free food when needed, from the top to the centre. It holds its bottom-up approach at its epicentre. No one is alone in here, even that bearded man silently drinking his beer. He feels the warmth. We all feel the vibe. No one forgotten, no one cast aside. I remember walking to the Holy Name School when I was a kid, the big exciting field and that magic pond. But we always smelt the pub nearby, standing on tiptoes, looking in windows to check if anyone left any beer. Cheeky kids and smiling faces, we held no fear. And now the old Abbey has reclaimed its past, turned what was once forgotten into a beautiful forecast. And all the old ghosts of yesterday's days can rest at ease, at last, at last.
Well, thank you to everybody. Originally, we wanted to do this a year ago and didn't get our act together. We were determined something was going to happen today. And hey, thank you very much, everybody, for coming and taking part and giving your contributions. And see you all this time next year, because we'll be doing it, hopefully, with a freedom that is just a little cramped at the moment. But forwards to freedom.
I didn't bring it with me.